Well, Diego, you might be able to see behind me, air traffic has returned to normal here at Washington National Airport. Passengers are moving through the terminal almost 24 hours after the worst air disaster for a generation here in the United States. You may have traveled through this airport yourself, Diego. It has one of the prettier descents into the U.S. capital over the Potomac River, as you mentioned, with some of the world's most iconic buildings laid out a short distance away. But all of that, of course, descended into disaster in just a matter of seconds here at the airport. And perhaps that descent into disaster was matched, arguably, by how fast this story became a highly partisan finger-pointing game.
A tragedy on the doorstep of the US Capitol, where grief was quickly upended by politics. An American Airlines flight from Kansas, seconds from landing at Washington Reagan National Airport, colliding with a US Army helicopter. The loss of all 67 passengers and crew on both aircraft, linking communities across the country.
This is a terrible tragedy that will unite those in Washington, D.C. and Wichita, Kansas forever.
And with the dead, including US and Russian figure skaters, tributes from the Kremlin. We offer our condolences to loved ones who lost our fellow citizens who died in this air crash. But even before the rescue teams had retrieved all the bodies from the freezing water and the cause of the tragedy has been established, US President Donald Trump claimed the Federal Aviation Administration had been compromised by his predecessors using employment diversity programs he's scrapping.
Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify for the position of a controller of airplanes pouring into our country.
As the blame game continues, authorities are facing questions about safety in one of the most congested airspaces in the world, with a history of recent near misses. And one line of inquiry appears to be focusing on whether the Black Hawk helicopter crew was wearing night vision equipment during its training mission.
It was a fairly experienced crew, and that was doing a required annual night evaluation. They did have night vision goggles.
But that's disputed, one defense official telling Associated Press the crew was not wearing them. As flights resumed at Washington National Airport, a country that hadn't suffered a fatal commercial air disaster since 2009 is now facing a national tragedy and a new president setting the tone for how it comes to terms with the loss.
Yeah, and that floral tribute at the end of my report there from that Boston skating club, who are mourning the loss of some of their members, as well, another community where the impact of this tragedy will be rippling out again this Wednesday night. Diego.
Owen, investigators said staffing at the control tower was not at normal levels. What do they mean?
Well, this is another bone of contention, potentially, and something that's still not entirely clear. Yes, you're right. Associated Press saying they'd obtained a preliminary report attributed to the National Transportation Safety Board, who are investigating this, suggesting that that control tower didn't have the appropriate level of staffing. Now, we know that those same officials have been raising concerns in the past year or so about the lack of air traffic controllers nationwide, suggesting there's a danger they could become overworked and over-fatigued as well. And yet, AP also reporting at the same time that the air traffic controllers at the centre of all of this are refuting that claim and saying the staff levels were normal. Understandably, perhaps the NTSB didn't want to be drawn on any of these claims when it spoke earlier this Thursday in the wake of this tragedy, partly because they say they've yet to retrieve the flight data recorders from these aircraft.